But there are some singers out there.
There's some singers out there, but they have to have, it's like a package. See, a lot of people have a bunch of dancers and stuff, and that distracts you from listening and looking at them.
Is that the trick?
This is the last song recorded by Sarah Dash and Nona Hendrix with Patti LaBelle. We do plan to go on tour again together. I think it'll be next year. First we'll do a CD.
There was a time when all of America stood still for Patti LaBelle. She wasn't just a singer, she was a force of nature. A woman whose voice could bring presidents to tears and send church walls trembling with a single note.
A true diva. A legend.
But behind the glitz, the gowns, and the thunderous applause, Patti carried a secret that haunted her for nearly 60 years. The very voice that inspired generations had once whispered in fear, because of love. Before her passing, Patti left behind a private confession that would change everything.
I loved 6 people. They were all women.
They were all artists. And not one of them had the courage to live out loud. In today's video, for the first time ever, we reveal those 6 names, each one a story of passion, pain, and secrecy. And each name has the power to shake the world of music to its core. Sarah Dash, 3 years, 1 bed, and a silence that never ended. Before the world ever whispered about Patti LaBelle's heartbreak, there was Sarah Dash, the first woman to leave a mark so deep it was never spoken aloud. In 1965, when the Blue Bells signed with Atlantic Records, Patti was still Patricia Hole, a hungry, East Coast girl chasing stardom, unaware that her heart would be torn apart by a love that had no name. Of the 3 other girls in the group, only Sarah Dash never switched rooms. For over 3 years, from 1965 to 1968, they shared everything. Makeup, towels, even underwear. If Sarah had a headache, Patti would take the aspirin too. One assistant said they moved like mirrors of each other, 2 souls entangled in ways no one dared define. Even when hotels offered private rooms, they always chose the same bed. Then came the night in Detroit, December 14, 1968. At the Book Cadillac Hotel, the door to their shared dressing room was locked from the inside for nearly an hour. When it finally opened, the 2 women were found on the floor, sweating, crying, and clinging to each other like the world was ending. No explanation was ever given, but rumors exploded. A male dancer claimed to have seen deep fingernail scratches on Patti's shoulder. From that day forward, their bond became something no one could speak about. Not love, not friendship, but something fierce, something desperate. A hunger for possession mixed with fear of being left behind. Then, without warning, Sarah walked away. No farewell, no press release, not even a goodbye. It was 1971.
Patti crumbled.
According to her nurse's journal, she collapsed in rehearsal, refused food for days, needed 4 fluids. She cancelled the summer tour, locked herself away for 11 weeks. The world was told it was laryngitis, but insiders knew the truth. Patti wasn't singing because she wasn't speaking at all. She removed all traces of Sarah from the studio. Her name was banned backstage. A former team member swore they saw Patti burn a letter, believed to be from Sarah, just before the group's first return to the studio in 1972. Even during the group's brief 1991 reunion, the distance was unmistakable. At the Apollo Theater on August 12, they stood less than 3 feet apart but never once locked eyes. When the curtain fell, a lighting tech said Patti shattered a mirror in her dressing room after Sarah walked out without a word. By 2021, the past seemed buried, until one final spark. On September 18, Sarah appeared unannounced at Patti's concert in Atlantic City. No press, no rehearsal. She sang a single verse and disappeared backstage. 2 days later, Sarah Dash was found dead in her Trenton apartment.
Alone. No will. No goodbye. The cause, heart failure.
But a source later revealed that the only photo on her wall was of her and Patti backstage in 1966. The back read simply, Detroit, written in red ink, now smeared with time. Patti never made a statement. She skipped the memorial.
Cancelled her show. Ordered her studio sealed.
And in the 2022 reissue of her memoir, she quietly erased an entire chapter. The years with LaBelle, 1965 to 1971, gone without explanation. Some say she feared being misunderstood. Others say she simply couldn't bear to relive it. But one haunting question remains. Was the truest story of Patti LaBelle's life not written in her songs, but in the silence between her and Sarah Dash, a love denied until the very end? Tina Turner, the cinnamon scent that drove Ike mad. If Sarah Dash's death was a silent curtain call, then what happened with Tina Turner was a slow-burning fire, one that smelled of cinnamon and secrecy, glowing beneath sequined gowns and the thunder of rock and roll. No one expected there had ever been a line to cross between Patti LaBelle and Tina Turner, until a long-forgotten front desk clerk from San Francisco's Fairmont Hotel broke the silence. According to him, the moment happened around 4 a.m. Patti walked out of Tina's suite barefoot, heels in hand, lipstick smudged, her blouse collar crooked and her hair a beautiful mess. That night, both women had performed at a charity gala at the Civic Center. They weren't on the same set list, but both made it to the after party. Tina arrived alone. Patti was reeling from a messy breakup with her husband, Armstead Edwards. Few noticed when the two stars returned to the same hotel. Even fewer paid attention when the door to room 142, Suite 2017, went untouched for over 3 hours, marked Do Not Disturb long after midnight. What lingered wasn't just speculation.
It was scent. Cinnamon.
Tina's signature fragrance after every show. Hotel staff later recalled how the scent clung to everything: bed linens, towels, even the bathrobe. Oddly enough, only one guest had officially checked in that night. The moment might have stayed buried in backstage rumor, until the next morning. Ike Turner stormed the front desk, demanding a new room with no explanation. A retired security guard remembered the way Ike stared daggers at Patti as she passed. Minutes later, his rage exploded.
He unleashed it on Tina.
Within months, she left him for good. The world blamed years of abuse. But behind closed doors within hushed industry circles, the Fairmont night was seen as the true breaking point. Not because of betrayal, but because that night, Tina tasted a kind of tenderness she had never known in her marriage. For Patti, the aftermath was quieter, but no less haunting. From that day forward, she refused to wear or even be near anything scented with cinnamon. Her stylist recalled a moment in January 1977. While testing a new fragrance, Patti abruptly slapped the technician's hand away, washed her wrist 3 times, and said nothing. The message was clear. Between 1977 and 1985, Patti and Tina never shared a stage.
No photos. No duets.
Not even a casual mention in interviews. It was as if their lives had diverged in silence. Then came a moment in the spring of 1985 at the Chicago Theater. Patti was performing If Only You Knew. As she reached the final verse, she suddenly stopped, stepped back, covered her face, and wept on stage in front of thousands. The band fell silent.
The spotlight dimmed.
It was the only time in her 6-decade career that Patti LaBelle couldn't finish a song. For more than 30 years, the two icons remained distant. And when Tina passed in 2023, there were no public tributes from Patti. Just a heavy silence, and a scent she would never be able to escape.
Because some nights don't end.
They linger in perfume, in memory, and in the quiet spaces between songs. Gladys Knight, the thigh touch photo, and the love that disappeared without a word. In the spring of 1982, while the world watched Patti LaBelle rise again like a phoenix, behind the curtain unfolded one of the most tender and heartbreaking chapters of her life, one few ever knew. If Only You Knew hadn't yet hit the airwaves, but Patti was on fire, crisscrossing the country, reclaiming her crown. Meanwhile, Gladys Knight was making her own quiet comeback, battling back from gambling addiction and the emotional toll of a bruised past, stepping into the spotlight once more after Midnight Train to Georgia had faded from the charts but not from memory. They were two icons, survivors of the 70s, whose lives had been held together by faith, voice, and sheer will. And yet, on one quiet April night, they weren't legends. They were just two exhausted souls, desperate for something real, something that didn't come with a contract or a headline. On April 7, 1982, after a show at Atlanta's Fox Theater, long after the crew had gone, a janitor's log tells the story. Around 2 a.m., he spotted Patti and Gladys on the backstage steps, arms around each other, heads gently resting together, wrapped in heavy coats, microphones still strapped to their hands. They didn't speak for nearly 20 minutes. Their silence was sacred. The janitor, moved by the intimacy of the moment, backed away and left them undisturbed. In the weeks that followed, something delicate and powerful bloomed, secretly.
No fanfare.
No roses. No notes soaked in perfume. Just gestures only they understood. Patti began wearing violet silk scarves, Gladys's favorite color, only on nights when she knew Gladys would be backstage. They exchanged Bible pages, underlined verses in red ink. They read scriptures aloud together. One tour manager recalled catching them after a show in Charlotte, hand in hand, foreheads touching, trembling as they read Corinthians through tears. He couldn't bring himself to interrupt. But love like that rarely survives the spotlight. In May 1982, everything shattered. After a concert in Philadelphia, Patti's label received an anonymous envelope. Inside, a photo of Patti and Gladys sitting close in a dressing room. Gladys's hand rested gently on Patti's thigh. A note was attached: "I think the public would be interested in this." The fallout was immediate. Patti was ordered to cut all visible ties. Gladys's camp was warned to avoid any misunderstandings.
Patti raged.
Gladys withdrew. Sources close to Knight said she panicked. She immersed herself in church, enrolled in Bible study at Georgia Baptist, and destroyed every handwritten note they'd shared. On May 28, Patti called Gladys's hotel in Baltimore. No answer. Later that day, she learned Gladys had abruptly flown back to Atlanta.
No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence.
For 2 decades, they were never seen together again. No public reunions, no joint interviews, no whispered acknowledgments on albums. Patti even refused Grammy duet invitations if the song had ties to Gladys Knight. People often speak of the men who made Patti LaBelle cry backstage. But few know one of those names is Gladys Knight. Not because of betrayal, but because of a love that was too fragile for the world, and a goodbye that never came. Phyllis Hyman, lipstick on the pillow and the purple notebook no one could open. In the mid-1980s, as black female artists were being crushed by industry demands, impossible beauty standards, and commercial expectations, Phyllis Hyman and Patti LaBelle stood out, not for their conformity, but for their quiet refusal to bend. Patti had been told to lose weight or lose her contract.
Phyllis?
She was deemed too tall, too moody, too unmarketable. The two women had survived years of being pushed aside by record labels and critics who couldn't see past their brilliance. It wasn't on stage, but in a shared glance inside West 57 Studios in New York, during a 1987 recording session for an AIDS awareness project, that their connection sparked. A production assistant later recalled that Patti was the last to leave the session. In her hand, a white silk handkerchief stained with red lipstick. She went straight to Phyllis's hotel. At around 2 a.m., a room service worker reportedly saw Patti at the edge of the bed, gently wiping lipstick from Phyllis's lips, still in her stage gown, mascara smudged, holding a half-full glass of champagne. From that moment on, something unspoken bloomed between them. They were never seen holding hands or making declarations. But somehow, Patti's New York tour dates always aligned with Phyllis's Harlem shows. They'd be spotted at Cleopatra's Needle, a quiet jazz spot, sipping mint tea, splitting one dessert, always leaving separately, but never far apart. Still, their bond lived under a shadow, haunted by Phyllis's deepening depression and the industry's rigid expectations. By the early 90s, Phyllis's mental health had begun to deteriorate. She became dependent on sleeping pills, was diagnosed with mood disorders, and carried an emotional heaviness few could reach. During a 1992 performance at the Apollo, she caught sight of Patti in the front row.
She froze.
Sat down mid-song. Her face went pale.
She couldn't speak. The show was cancelled.
Backstage whispers said she collapsed into Patti's arms and needed 4 fluids for hours afterward. Executives, especially from Patti's camp, grew nervous. We couldn't let them become the face of a kind of affection the public wasn't ready to accept, one manager later confessed. By 1993, Patti was advised to distance herself. A nearly finished duet was abruptly shelved, and the master tape mysteriously disappeared. And just like that, Patti began to fade from Phyllis's orbit. The last time they were seen together was April 7, 1995, at a small Italian restaurant in Midtown. A waiter remembered Patti arriving first, waiting nearly an hour, ordering 2 glasses of champagne. She drank both, alone, and left in silence. Exactly 2 months later, on June 30th, Phyllis Hyman was found dead in her Manhattan apartment. She had taken her own life with a mix of alcohol, sedatives and sleeping pills, just hours before a scheduled Apollo performance. On her vanity, a single champagne glass with a faint trace of lipstick. On the pillow, a red smear beside dried tears. In her will, she left one cryptic line: "Do not let anyone open the purple notebook." When the apartment was cleared, they found it, a velvet-bound notebook, locked with no key. Patti never asked about it. But Phyllis's assistant later claimed the notebook held detailed entries. Every night they spent together, what perfume Patti wore, the Bible verse they once read aloud during a snowstorm in 1989, the night New York went dark. Some say love doesn't die from denial. It dies when no one dares to speak its name. And for Patti LaBelle, perhaps that name will always be Phyllis Hyman, spoken only in silence in red-stained pillows and in glasses of champagne that were never finished. Millie Jackson, the shaking van and the missing tape. It wasn't loneliness or longing that pulled Patti LaBelle toward Millie Jackson, it was something far more dangerous. Millie radiated emotional chaos, raw sexuality, and a reckless fire that terrified Patti because it felt like staring into a mirror she'd spent her entire life avoiding. Everything Patti worked so hard to hide beneath her polished, controlled persona, Millie wore like a badge of honor, daring the world to flinch. The summer of 1977, Georgia. They shared the stage at the Soul Sisters Unit event in Augusta. That night changed everything. It was the first time Patti saw Millie perform live, belting out a moment's pleasure without shame, eyes locked on Patti like a dare. When she screamed the word lover, it wasn't just part of the song. It was a direct hit. Patti said later it felt like Millie stripped her bare in front of thousands. That night, after the crowd cleared and the other artists left, neither Millie nor Patti returned to the hotel. A sound tech later claimed that around 2 a.m., the backstage van was still parked behind the venue, lights low, curtains drawn. As he walked past, he swore he heard faint laughter, the rustle of silk on skin, and the unmistakable scent of Patti's signature perfume, mixed with sweat. Nothing was ever confirmed. But weeks later, during a radio interview in Atlanta, Ike Turner let loose a line that sent the gossip world into a frenzy. "I ain't worried 'bout Tina running off with no man. I'm worried 'bout Millie. She got Tina looking at women different." That quote lit a wildfire. Tabloids began connecting Millie to a string of rumored flings with veteran female artists. Patti's name showed up on that list. The only evidence? A grainy backstage photo, Patti's hand on Millie's waist, Millie gripping Patti's belt, both laughing like they didn't care who saw. But what they had wasn't some romantic fairy tale. There were no roses, no letters, no waiting by the phone. With Millie, it was skin, hunger, and a kind of intoxicating power that made Patti drop every defense. One person close to Millie once said, "Patti told me she was scared of Millie, but she couldn't stay away. It was like playing with razor blades." Then it ended, suddenly, violently. March 1978. A sex scandal broke when a demo tape of Millie simulating orgasmic moans leaked, accidentally sent to a conservative Christian ethics magazine. The fallout was immediate. Her label blacklisted her. The joint tour with Patti was cancelled without explanation. Patti disappeared. She erased Millie's name from every set list, burned a red satin scarf her assistant said she'd once worn after a show with Millie, and locked herself inside her private studio for 3 days. She never spoke Millie's name publicly again. Not once in over 2 decades. But Millie? She was made of different stuff. In a 1985 interview, she said, "Patti was the only one who made me think about dropping my bad girl act." When asked if they were lovers, she just smirked. "That question ain't on my track list, baby." They never reunited. No interviews. No apologies. Nothing but silence, until one strange night in 2007, when Millie performed a remix of Your Symphony in New Orleans. Patti was spotted in the 3rd row. No makeup. Dressed in black. She left the venue the moment the song ended. They say love doesn't always bloom in kindness. Sometimes it's born in fire, wild, forbidden, and unforgettable. In Patti's costume archive, the jacket she wore that summer is still sealed in black velvet. Never worn again. And Millie, for all her scandals, headlines, and sold-out shows, has never once spoken the name of the only woman who made her feel real. Whitney Houston, the erased tape and the embrace that haunts. Beneath the blinding stage lights and hollow cheers of the 1993 Soul Train Awards, a moment unfolded behind the curtain that was never meant to be seen. A backstage camera, briefly left running, captured something raw, something real. In that fleeting footage, Patti LaBelle stood behind Whitney Houston, arms wrapped tightly around her waist, her face buried in the crook of Whitney's neck. The younger singer stood motionless, her shoulders trembling, silent tears cutting trails down her flawless face. The clip lasted only seconds before a crew member shut it off. By morning, producers had ordered every frame destroyed, deemed inappropriate for the show's image. But those few seconds told a deeper story. It wasn't the first time Patti and Whitney had shared a stage, but it was the first time they touched without cameras or choreography. No performance, no pretense. Just one legendary woman holding onto another who was quietly falling apart. While the other stars slipped into limos and headed for glittering after-parties, a hotel employee later confirmed that Patti never returned to her room at the Ritz. Instead, she went straight to the 16th floor, Whitney's floor, and stayed for 11 hours. No staff were allowed inside. Not even housekeeping. The next morning, when Sony reps knocked on Whitney's door to prep her for a BET interview, there was no answer. By noon, only Patti had been seen leaving the floor. No makeup, hair tousled, wearing a borrowed robe that didn't match the gown she arrived in. She asked for a private car. She didn't check out. That night was never spoken of again. But something in Whitney shifted. Within weeks, fans began to notice the change. Dark circles, strained vocals, unpredictable moods. On tour for The Bodyguard, she smashed dressing room mirrors more than once. One time, after spotting a photo of her and Patti pinned to the wall. Her team started hiding photos to avoid triggering her. A family nurse later revealed Whitney had started spraying her pillow each night with a jasmine perfume, Patti's scent from that award night. Every morning, she'd toss the pillow to the floor and scrub the scent away, as if trying to forget what her heart refused to let go. Patti never spoke publicly about that night. But those close to her noticed the signs. At certain private shows in New Orleans or Philly, she'd ask the lights to be cut during the climax of If You Ask Me To. Sometimes she'd leave the stage mid-song without a word. By 1996, Whitney had descended into addiction. Her once radiant image gave way to hollow cheeks, shaky vocals, and tabloid headlines. But in October 2005, a quiet note surfaced. Records from a California rehab center show a call was made from Patti LaBelle's personal number. She requested Whitney's financial sponsor remain anonymous. They were never photographed together again.
Except once.
In December 2011, at a memorial for Etta James, Whitney appeared unexpectedly. When she learned Patti was in attendance, she locked herself in the women's restroom for nearly 40 minutes, then slipped out a side exit without singing a note. Just weeks later, on February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found dead in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton. The cause? Accidental drowning, complicated by drugs and sedatives. In the room, 2 pillows were found misaligned. One held the faint trace of jasmine, Patti's signature sent from the early 90s, long since retired. Days later, Patti was spotted leaving a small Philadelphia church, clutching a worn black leather notebook. Her eyes were red. A friend quietly revealed, it was her journal. The one where she writes the names of every woman she's ever loved and lost. There are 6 names inside. But only one was followed by a small pressed flower and a single word written in faded ink.
Whitney. 6 women.
6 silent chapters. 6 unspoken loves carved into the heart of a legend. Patti LaBelle's highest note may have rung out on stage, but her truest, deepest screams were the ones the world never heard.